Welcome to 56-Bit Cloud Cafe, your go-to destination for all tech topics in the cloud. I'm Athir Zalal.
And I'm Patrick Camilleri. And together we'll be addressing various cloud topics.
Welcome back to our IAM series. In our previous episode, we get to know IAM, and we went through the fundamental elements, users, groups, and roles. Today, we are digging deeper into IAM. So, IAM is about controlling who can do what. How does it actually work? I'm picturing locks and keys. Am I close?
Yeah, it's not exactly locks and keys, but quite similar. It's more of a digital version of locks and keys. So, IAM, as we said in the last episode, is all about creating users, groups, policies, and roles. Whenever you create a new AWS account, we already said this last time, you are going in as the root user, which is best practice to not use it. The first thing you do with the root user is to create an admin user in IAM. And then you discard the root user credentials. When you're creating a user in IAM, what you are creating is a permanent set of keys, if you want to call them keys, right? So these are credentials. They are a username, and if you're going into the console, they are a password, right? So a username and password. If you know both, then you have a way in to that AWS account, and only that AWS account. So ultimately, that is something that you know. It's very important as well that you add something that you have. So this is a basics of security, something you know, username and password, something you have, like a multi-factor authentication token, a one-time code which you have on your mobile, for example. There are many ways of doing this, but once you have both factors, something you know, something you have, then you are quite secure in terms of that user. Of course, that user, you will share the credentials with that user and you will go in to that account. Once you're in, then it's time for the policies to kick in. So the policies are attached to the user and the policies will define what that user can do. Can he read only? Can he do admin level actions? Can he delete or she delete instances on EC2? Create or delete buckets in S3. IAM is ultimately a global service, so whatever you do works in all AWS regions inside that account. And it also works with all services. So from it, you can centrally control the actions that that user can do in any AWS service. And there are other things you can do to be more best practice. So one thing you should do is create groups. Groups allow you to define a specific set of policies of whoever is joined to that group, what they can do once they log in. So let's say we have two users. One is called Joe, one is called Jane. Joe and Jane are joined to a group called admin. Now, the policy, the administrator policy, is attached to the group. So Joe and Jane will both get that level of permissions, the admin level of permissions. And this allows better and easier administration of your users once you start having a lot of users. And you can create multiple groups. Users can be joined to multiple groups as well. We'll talk about how these then affect the permissions once they are attached to multiple groups. But ultimately, let's keep it simple. We have two users attached to this group. They can log in with their username and password. Each user has its own username and password, and they will get the permissions assigned to that group. Another thing is roles. We spoke a bit about them yesterday, but ultimately roles allow you to create temporary credentials, temporary keys, right? So just like, this is very similar to when you have a lock on a door. If the lock is manual using a physical key, that is a permanent key. You cannot change it unless you change the lock. If it gets stolen, people can go in and that's it. You're becoming insecure. So that's a permanent key. It never expires, never changes. On the other hand, roles allow you to create temporary keys. So think of it with doors as well, when you have a code on that door, and that code, the digital code, expires after, say, 1 day. Think of hotels, right? When you're going into your hotel room, those are digitally marked to expire when you are signing out of the hotel, when you are checking out of the hotel. So that automatic expiration of the keys is what makes roles really powerful, because once you have an expiry, that key cannot be used ever again. You need to create a new key. And roles allow you to do that and allow you to very easily create new keys. So when would we use it? We would use roles when it comes to cross-service administration, right? So let's say we have an EC2 server and there is an application inside it. So what we do is we attach a role to that server. And that allows the application to use the role to get temporary keys. What can it do with those keys? It depends what the roles policies are. But for example, we can save to S3, save some data from the server to S3. After an hour, those keys will expire. So they are safe because they only have an hour. And the server needs to get new keys, which is easy to do. It is all inbuilt in AWS. So in summary, we have users and groups. Then we have policies attached to those. And those are permanent credentials, permanent keys. Roles and the policies attached to them, those allow us to have temporary, much more secure credentials and keys.
Okay, so now we want to talk about policies. What are policies? How do they exactly work?
Right, so policies are an essential part to anything you do in IAM and thus the security of your AWS account. Whenever we create users, groups, or roles, those we call them identities because they define who you are. Once you log in with a credential, whether it's a permanent credential or a temporary credential, then the system needs to identify what can you do on the system. And the what can you do on the system, the authorization part we call it, that is defined by policies. So you are in full control of what those identities, what those users, groups, and roles, what they can do once they are logged in. We do this through policies, which basically means we create this small document. It's a JSON document, JSON format. And the document says this specific action, this person is allowed. This specific other action, this person is allowed, but only if, and a number of conditions. So that's how policies work. We create these documents, and in the console, you don't even have to work with those JSON format. There is a much easier way, like a wizard kind of format, to create these policies. Not only that, but AWS comes with a lot of predefined policies. So the base, you start from these usually. So if I want admin access, meaning full control over that account, to be given to a user named Joe. That user, we attach a policy, and it doesn't have to be a policy that I create. It can be a policy that is created by AWS. In fact, it's called an AWS managed policy. It's literally called administrator access, one word. You'll find it at the very top. You just click it and join it to that user, Joe. So now once Joe goes in with his credentials, he will have full admin access on the account. There are many other policies from AWS. Admin access is the highest one. Then there is read-only access, where the user would be able to only read. There will be stuff in the middle, so they have full admin on S3 or read-only on S3, full admin on EC2 or read-only on EC2. Usually AWS gives these basic policies that everyone needs. Now, eventually, we'll get to a point where we want to go even deeper, even lower in terms of granularity. How much permissions do we want to give? We want to give less permissions. We'll talk about that later with the principle of least privilege. But Basically, you can create your own policies. And once you create them, those policies, they are called customer managed policies. Again, once you create them, you can attach them to those identities, to that user, group, or role.
That's perfect. Now we have reached the end of our episode. Join us in the next episode as we bring you even closer to a secure and optimized cloud experience. And as always, happy cloud computing. If you have questions, suggestions, or want to share your feedback, connect with us on social media.
Also, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and to leave us a review to help others find their way to the Cloud Cafe.